Hey everyone, this is Jared, Alpha X-Ray 3 Bravo Lima, and tonight I'll be reviewing the Icom IC-9700 all-mode transceiver. But before I do so, I just want to spend a brief moment explaining why I introduced myself as Alpha X-Ray 3 Bravo Lima rather than Victor Kilo 3 Bravo Lima. Australians on this day, which is Anzac Day, can use a special prefix AX in front of instead of their usual prefix VK. Anzac Day is all about reflecting on the horrors of warfare and honouring those who have served our community. I haven't served myself or have a family history of those who have served, but I have friends who have served, and Australia wouldn't be the country it is today without the people who've served our country. So, in that regard, I just want to do the traditional thing and give a moment's silence and say lest we forget, which is a traditional saying to remind us of basically the horrors of warfare. Back to the radio. Now, the Icom IC-9700 is an all-mode transceiver for VHF and UHF. It covers the 2 metre, 70 centimetre and 23 centimetre or 1.2 gigahertz amateur radio bands. It has 100 watt outputs on 2 metres, 75 output on 70 centimetres and 10 watts output on 23 centimetres or 1.2 gigahertz. So quite a powerful rig for VHF work and punching well above its weight in UHF as well. 10 watts is about the average for a 23 centimetre transceiver, so in that regard it's pretty much business as usual. Now, some of the features of this radio are basically it's got all the things that the IC-7300 HF transceiver had in it. So it's got, your real-time waterfall scope, band scope and waterfall display. It's got real-time audio scope and spectrum display. It's got voice recorder, the meter function. This one has a special satellite mode for working satellites or birds, and it works really, really well at that. We've had great reports from the community. And it's actually got 2 pages and the rest is digital voice functions there. Another nice feature is it comes free. You have to download it with the Icom CS-9700 software, which allows you to program in your favourite repeaters very, very easily. So that's nice to use. At the moment, I've got this one scanning the repeaters, just in case there's anyone on, so I can show you the audio scope, which I absolutely love on this radio. So that's pretty much it. On the back, it has a UHF or SO239 connector for 2 meters. Some people might not like that. It's not actually soldered in. You can unscrew it just from the back, pull the socket out and swap it out for an end connector. I don't recommend that. I don't think there's any real need for a UHF connector on 2 meters. And I do like the fact it reminds me not to plug the wrong antenna in. But if you do want to swap it, I would recommend ordering the official Icom part. If you can't get it in your country, try another country or try an amateur friend. I read a story about someone who bought a UHF connector off eBay, one of the China jobs, and chucked it in their transceiver. And I just thought, why are you removing, a factory quality PL259, SO239 or UHF socket, and replacing it with an eBay bit of junk? And so, in that regard, I'd leave it alone. It has and for the other two, 70 centimetres and 23 centimetres, it's got UHF connectors. Now, each connector goes straight into its own bandpass filter, and then there's relays that allows you to select up to 2 bands at any time to listen to and watch on your receiver. It's full duplex, so you can work satellites. That's what that's all about. Now, the one limitation of that arrangement is you can't have on your main receiver and your sub receiver, you can't have both on 2 meters, both on 70 centimeters, or both on 23 centimeters, like you can in some mobile rigs. So in that regard, it can't do that, but I don't find that a limitation for something you're going to have in your shack. Mine at the moment is scanning 2 meters on the main receiver and 70 centimeters on the sub receiver. The nice thing about this radio is it has 2 speaker outputs, so you can run 2 external speakers, or if you've only got 1 external speaker, you can have that for your main receiver, and your sub receiver will come out by default on the built-in speaker. You can change that to a mix, just like you can change the audio mix in your headphones. It's got the standard 8-pin mic connector, which I really like because I've plugged in my Heil microphone here with a standard Heil cable. It drives it beautifully. I've had great audio reports. It's the same as the IC-7300 in that regard, and basically it looks identical to a 7300. There's a few. It's a little bit different in that this is your main receiver control, this is your sub-receiver control. That's pretty much it. There's a few different buttons, but they look beautiful next to each other, so that's really good too. Now the other thing is that should be known is it has a standard Icom SD card on the front, which is great for updates. As far as I know, that's putting the update on the flash card is the best way and only way of doing updates. Someone did ask whether you can use a USB cable to do it. I don't believe you can, but I could be wrong. To do that, all you do is you put an SD card in, format it with the radio. It has a format option in the menu. Take it out, put it in your computer, go into the IC-9700 folder, copy the firmware into that directory, unmount the drive, plug it into the Icom, follow the instructions. It's very, very easy. Icom have the easiest firmware updates in the industry. Anyone who's had to do a Yaesu will know what I'm talking about there. So that's fantastic as well. Some bonus features. It has an Ethernet port on the back. So if you have what is it? I'm going to cheat here. I'm trying to find it. RSBA1 version 2, the Icom remote control software, you can remotely control this radio. So that is an additional bit of software you have to buy, but it could be a really good investment if you want to operate remotely, especially if you have something like another Icom radio. The IC-7610, sorry, has built-in Ethernet as well, but the other Icom radios, if you have a computer, that software does come with a program to run and remotely control the radio that way. So it's nice that feature is built into this radio, but if you have an older Icom rig and you want to buy the software, you can probably use that too. An example would be the IC-7100 sitting here. So that's pretty much it. One thing I did want to make mention of, it does have a key jack for Morse code on the back of the radio. That's really nice. But one thing I wanted to mention specifically is the build quality of the radio. It is absolutely fantastic. It's the same as the IC-7300. These multifunction knobs are solid. There's no real play in them, not any disturbing play. You'll know what I'm talking about if you've used knobs that don't feel nice. It's a funny thing to say, but you get what I'm saying. The knobs feel nice, right, guys? Just leave it at that. Very solid construction, and I think it's the benchmark for Icom. It's better than the IC-7610, and I really, really love that regard of the radio. It is slightly heavier than the 7300. I got a surprise taking it out of the box, but it's only half a kilo heavier, so it's not much, but it is slightly heavier. Otherwise, identical form factor, and quite a lovely radio. Now, who do I think this is targeted towards? Now, having spent a bit of time doing the research on the radio, playing with it myself, and talking to people on different community online groups, I can say that the people who there's some people aren't as pleased with this radio as others, but the vast majority are very, very pleased, and I'll go into that in a second. But personally, I think this radio is targeted to, well, Ratmo Radio thinks this radio is targeted to those who want to add 2370 and 1.2 gigahertz capability to their shack. Now, 1.2 or 23 centimeters is probably the big one because this is the first radio in quite some time that actually has that capability. So that's sort of, I mean, a lot of us were surprised when that was made a standard feature. It was an add-in card for most other transceivers Icom have ever made. So I think that's a real bonus, and I was very excited to get it into my shack for that reason. So going back a bit and digressing, I should say, yeah, it's for people who want to expand the capability of their shack. Maybe they're into HF and want to start getting into 2-meter SSB DXing or 77-meter DXing. It would be good for contests. So I plan on using this in the Remembrance Day contest, which is another thing related to remembering the horrors of war. Yeah, it's basically great for expanding capability of your shack. Now, the other group who are really pleased with it are those who want to work satellites. So there's some great videos on YouTube that you'll find. I'll put a link in the description to some of them of people working satellites. The radio performs flawlessly in that regard, and the users who've bought the radio for that purpose are very, very happy. So lastly, if you believe the motto that one of my ham friends often says, nothing exceeds like excess, this is a beautiful radio to use on repeaters. As I said, my Heil mic plugs straight in. It's just like a HF repeater, and watching the audio scope and just listening to the radio is really, really fun. Unlike HF, when you're on a repeater, there's no noise. You usually get full quietening. So the audio scope feature of this radio really does show off how well someone's got their rig set up. You know, you can tell if someone's muffled, you can see it on the scope, you can say, hey, you need to boost your highs at 2 kilohertz, or you need to roll your bass off a little bit. So the audio scope is a really helpful feature, and I think the people who are getting into or starting out in the hobby and needing getting on a repeater for the first time, I think a lot of IC-9700 users are going to help them set their audio up, because that feature is really, really awesome. So would I recommend it just to work repeaters? No, it's a little bit excessive for that, but it really is a lot of fun, and I'm glad I don't have to mount a mobile rig in my shack for that purposes. I'll be frank with you. It's just so much nicer to have a full desktop unit. So those are probably your top 3 reasons for, I guess, getting this radio. You know, expanding the capability of your shack, working satellites and that sort of thing, and, you know, maybe doing a bit of DXing or contesting. Now, talking about the performance, Rob Sherwood of Sherwood Engineering, the quite renowned receiver review site, he bought one, and his initial testing of it was that the close-in dynamic range was 74 decibels, and that's at 2 kilohertz spacing. Now, he was kind enough to send me data sheets from transceivers he's previously reviewed. I've had a really hard time trying to find good data on 2 and 70 centimeter rigs, and it turns out this radio has the best close-in dynamic range of any 270 and 23 centimeter all-mode rig ever released. So in that regard, the performance is stellar for close-in dynamic range. I've had no trouble working in any of the repeaters or my friends. I've received signals over at 40 dB over with the preamp on, and a couple of times when I had it on a different antenna, the OVF light flashed. I think there might have been an electric motor or something closer to that antenna. When that did happen, all I did was turn the function IP plus on or turn the preamp off, and had no issues there. So in terms of performance, it's really at the top of its game, and you know, it is better than Icom's previous 23 centimeter capable rigs. It's better than the IC-9100. It's better than the 910. It's better than the 970. So, you know, it really is top of the range in that regard. Now, I'll talk a little bit about limitations, and this is one of the things that I guess got Icom a little bit unstuck and got a little bit of people offside, is that on the back it does have a SMA connector, a female one, that's meant to be a 10 megahertz reference input. A lot of people thought that they'd be able to get their Rubium atomic clock or GPS locking or GPS disciplined oscillator, plug it into the back, and basically keep this radio really, 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 really stable. So the standard oscillator is oscillator is 0.5 parts per million in terms of stability. That's completely acceptable for almost all use cases except for weak signal and moon bounce. As I said, quite niche use cases. So, and when I say weak signal, I mean, you know, noise floor, 5-minute transmissions, just so you can be heard sort of thing. I don't mean someone you can barely hear on 2 meter DX during a tropospheric ducting event. I mean, you know, the people who are running beacons, basically. So that connector, they thought they'd be able to plug this atomic clock in and, you know, get this radio really, really stable. Now, I should point out, no radio ever commercially released has been able to do that, and this radio can't either. when you do plug in a frequency reference, it just lets you fine-tune your radio's calibration in the menu. It doesn't let you lock the radio's oscillator to an external device. Why Icom did it that way, I can't tell you. I do know it got some people excited and then very disappointed. Those who have measured the stability of this radio show that it far exceeds the specification sheet. Once again, Rob Sherwood measured the stability of his radio, and the deviation at 23 centimetres was a maximum of 70 hertz, either side, over sampled with a real HP frequency counter, 5335A from memory, and over the course of 8 minutes, looked at every 30 seconds, the maximum deviation while transmitting was 70 hertz. So that's heaps better than the calculated value if you go and do 0.5. So basically, if you read the specification sheet, if you realise that every radio you've ever bought in the past couldn't be connected to an atomic clock, you're not going to be disappointed in that. So in that regard, Icom did kind of make a rod for their back by putting the connector there and not fully explaining what it's for. But bear in mind, this is a Japanese company, and the translation mightn't have been that accurate. The manual is 269 pages long. There's a lot of features in this radio, and it's quite brief. So maybe they didn't really advertise, or the local distributors in English-speaking countries didn't really understand what that was for. But for your everyday person, it's not a big deal at all. It's not going to affect my use of the radio. It doesn't bother me. And if you do want to do that sort of stuff, this radio is going to squash the prices of second-hand IC-910Hs, and it's destroyed the price of the IC-9100, even though that's got HF features. So go and buy one of them and modify it. There's kits available, and enjoy the fact that this radio's made, plummeted the prices. And let the people who don't care about that buy this. So that's what I wanted to say about that. So all round, I think this is a fantastic rig. There is one other limitation I should point out that I almost forgot, and that's that it doesn't have a general coverage receiver. You can't listen to, say, the police frequencies on 160 megahertz or something, or anything like that. It's strictly the ham bands. Even if you unlock it with a mod, all you'll get is the widest ham band possible for any country, which I believe is 144 to 148 for 2 meters, for example. That's what ours does in VK. I believe it's locked in Europe to 144 to 146, but I could be wrong. Anyway, so you can't receive anything outside of the ham bands. I don't think that's a problem because there's really not that much interesting to listen to anymore. All of our local police and most emergency services are either encrypted now, or they will be encrypted very shortly. It doesn't bother me. It was a little bit of a surprise, but if you look at the block diagram once again, you'll see that each antenna port goes through a bandpass filter. And to give this a stellar performance, you really do need to make that filter tight and lock it down to the ham band. So I completely understand why it's got that limitation. Once again, it's not a real limitation in the sense of the word, because it actually adds performance to the radio. If you do want a general coverage receiver, the IC-8600 is expensive but world-class performance, and I spoke to Icom about that, and they said, yep, we acknowledge it's expensive, but at the end of the day, it is made for commercial purposes. So, if you're really into shortwave lifting, you've got that option. Otherwise, once again, enjoy the plummeting prices of second-hand receivers. Even something like an IC-9700 or a Yaesu FT991A could provide the general coverage for 2 meters if you wanted, or 70 centimeters. So there is that. So all round, really love the radio. Think it's fantastic to have in my shack, and I'm not worried at all by some of the, I guess, earlier reports of issues, because when you look into them, they're not issues. And I actually want to send out a shout to Icom Australia, because I heard a story. One of the people who complained prominently about this the frequency limitation issue, they sent their the frequency drift issue. They sent their radio back to Icom Australia, and Icom Australia sent them a second radio in return, which they still complained about because they were both within specifications. So I want to send a shout out to Icom Australia for that level of service. People ask, people might comment that I'm pro Icom. Well, when they've always treated you with good service, they've got a 5-year warranty, and you work 5 minutes from their main warehouse where you can get any spare part you need, and they'll sell it to you. What's there to complain about? They've always been fantastic to me. So in that regard, I have no official relationship with Icom, but they've always provided excellent customer service. So in that regard, yeah, I am pro Icom. I like being treated. As a customer, I like to be treated with good service. So there is that. So yeah, but that's pretty much it for me. It's a fantastic rig. If you want to play on the ham bands, get on there with 2-meter sideband, add some capability to your shack. It's fantastic. It looks awesome next to a 7300. I kind of wish I hadn't have sold mine because they really do look like a nice set of twins. And that's another thing I think rigs today lack is the nice matching accessories that we used to have in the old days. If you're into that sort of thing, which I sort of am, 7300 looks lovely next to this. So on that note, I'll end it. I think it's fantastic. Everyone have a lovely day. If you're in Australia, remember to reflect on the horror of war and acknowledge the service of our countrymen. And 73 to all from Alpha X-Ray 3 Bravo Lima.